I'm going to have to change my name to Mr. Betamax if I keep this up. I got another Sony Betamax. This time it's an SL2710. Now, for those keeping count, this was the third Beta Hifi model that followed the SL5200 and the SL2700. 2710 was the final design of the Beta Transport, the 711 chassis, and this one has a jam tape in it. Very common problem. You'll see this across all the 711 chassis designs. Here's another Betamax from the animation studio I've been doing some work for. I guess this is some of his work. A sketch on the back here. I'll just cover up his name and phone number that's on here. And he says it's an SL2710. It was repaired at AMI. That's where he used to take his stuff in 2023, and it failed also in 2023. Will not eject tape. Tape played fine, started to rewind, stop tape, eject failure, tape is stuck. So we have another one here that the tape is stuck in. Let's, before I even power it up, we'll see what's wrong, why it's not working, or open it up anyway. SL2710, this was the unit that replaced the SL2700, which I have. The 2700 was an expensive machine. This was designed as a little less expensive. This was Sony's third Beta Hifi model. So the first Beta Hifi was the SL5200, and then it was followed up with the SL2700, and then the 2710. The 2500 was basically the same machine as the 2700 without Beta Hifi. Just so if you're following Sony's timeline. This one does not use separate direct drive motors. So the SL2000 portable, the SL2500 mono home deck, and the SL2700 Hi-Fi stereo deck used separate motors for the take-up and supply reels, separate motor for the drum, separate motor for the capstan, and a separate loading motor and a separate motor for the front loader. So on the 2500 and 2700, drum motor, capstan motor, take-up motor, supply motor, loading motor, and front loader. 6 motors. This has got 4 motors. This one's got a real drive motor. You got a drum motor, capstan motor, real drive motor that operates both take-up and supply, as well as the loading motor, and the loading motor does double duty through this clutch assembly and planetary gear assembly. It will either transfer power down to the loading ring, which you can see it's stuck midway and there's some slack on the tape, and it also will operate the front loader. And as you can see, when I'm turning the gear here, nothing appears to be happening. It's not moving the loading ring at all. It goes one way, but it doesn't go the other way. It's like it's jammed. Wonder what the problem is. What do you guys think? Are you thinking the same thing that I am? That the gear on the bottom of this is got a crack in it and it's not turning? That's what I think the problem is. Before I even go any further, I think the problem is going to be the black gear. I think it's black. It might be white. But I think the gear on the bottom of this is broken. Let's see if I'm correct. Let's see if the very first thing I try on this unit is correct. We'll remove the belt. And I have a couple screws to remove this mechanism. I got to take this off first. I got to change bits. It's a number 1. Phillips. You know what? I can do this. It's starting to warm up in here, and it's only 3 o'clock. I can turn the air conditioning on. I'm trying to cool this place down just a bit before it starts to really get warm. It's going to get warm this week, they say. So we'll pull off the tape tensioner, or the belt tensioner. and this should just lift off. This is a little different than some of the other ones, but it still lifts just off. And there's a spring here that goes around this little metal clip on this one, which has been replaced with a plastic clip on the more modern ones. Alright, now I can take out the screws here that hold the loading motor planetary gear set in place. The question is it going to come out in one piece, or is the gear going to be broken into multiple pieces? Well, it's not broken into multiple pieces, but I still say it's this one here that's broken. Let's just see if I'm right. It's going to be this one right here. Guaranteed it's that gear that's got a crack in it. Yeah, you can see it. When I try to turn it, watch what happens. It just slips because it's got a crack in it, and the crack is right there. You can see the crack. So we got to fix the gear. This is a relatively simple repair. We just pop the top off this one and glue it back onto the shaft in the correct position. There we go. Push that through like that and just pull it straight down like that. Alright, that gear can lift out of there. This is the piece that is broken. I'm going to leave that on there because it's what holds it in place. But here's the broken part. As you can see, that gear is broken. It's got a crack in it, and what we need to basically do is to glue it back on, just like that, and hopefully it won't slip once it's glued back on. So I'm going to mix up some epoxy. We're going to put some epoxy on here. It's nice that this has got like a cross section etched into it, so it gives it something to grip with. These were typically smooth and they were just press fit. So this repair has been successful. I've done this repair over the years probably 100 times. Right? It's just it's one repair that is very common on these machines. Sony did have a replacement part at one time. You could just buy the whole, like you could buy the gear actually and stuff the gear on the end, or you could buy this entire shaft. It was already pre-molded, but at one point you could buy the gear and put the gear on there. I've done this repair many times over the years. I think probably 2 or 3 of the machines that I currently own have had the repair done on it, just because it's quite a common problem. Again, it's age related, like everything. Everything gets old. Parts break down when they get old. Plastic shrinks. Problem is the metal doesn't shrink, and something's going to give, and it's always the plastic gear. Now, yes, there may be a slight space here because, of course, it's still cracked, but the reason it's not unloading is it can't turn because it's slipping. Once it's secured in place, this should probably mesh just fine. And you might hear a tick, 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 but I've never had them break again. I guess it's possible, but I haven't seen them break again. This gear, maybe somebody's 3D printing it, I don't know. But for what it would cost to have one 3D printed and sent, by the time the cost of the gear was factored in, and the shipping and the broker fees, it would undoubtedly happen because all these idiots that sell parts, nobody seems to know what the post office is. They always pick the path of least resistance like lightning, and they get on their computer and they click a mouse, and the FedEx guy picks it up or the UPS guy picks it up, and then the receiver in Canada gets stuck with $40 in broker fees. And that's what happens. You get stuck with broker fees because the shippers don't realize that when they export a part, even if it's got no cost to it, they do a processing fee. I went over this before, but I got this is probably 20 years ago, if not more. At least, well, probably 20 years ago. I'm thinking back 20 years ago. I had one of these things. You know what these are, right? One of these LED lights when they were newfangled devices that were promised that they were going to last us for 20 years, and I started putting them in my house. I think it was 2009. This is when this happened, 2009, because that's when I built the addition. And I put some in. And one of them still works today, but one of them died within about 3 months. And I took it back to Home Depot, and Home Depot said, oh, you got to call the number on the package. We can't help you. So I called the manufacturer, which was Slovenia, and they said, no problem, we'll send you a replacement. And they did. They sent me a replacement by FedEx, and FedEx charged me $40 broker fees for a light bulb that was, it might have been 20 bucks when it was new, because they were expensive then. I'm going to use cold weld just because that's what I have handy. I usually use JB Weld, but when I was at the local building supply place, the guy told me that, oh yeah, this stuff's the same and it's cheaper. Let me tell you something, it's not the same. It is cheaper, but I think that JB Weld is stronger. Maybe it's just because the time that I had this fail, I didn't mix the right proportions or something, but I just have found that the original stuff seems to be better. Again, maybe I didn't mix it to the right proportion, but I just found the original stuff seems to do a better job. So we'll mix this up well. I know I'm mixing an awful lot of epoxy just for a little tiny epoxy job, but I want to make sure I've got even proportions of it, because if you don't mix it right, if you get too much of the hardener versus the resin or vice versa, you just won't get the strength. So sometimes a little easier if you can kind of measure it out and see that you're getting the proportions pretty much correct. I think that's probably mixed adequately. So I'll get some onto the end here. And push it back through. I want to make sure that it gets into the little grooves on here so that it will seal it up good. Push it all the way down, make sure we don't have too much spillage here. Get it to fill that crack.
Stick that into the crack and then put your caulk on. And we want to make sure we fill that. You can use your finger. You really don't want to just stuff a bunch of caulk in something. Otherwise you end up using a ton of caulk.
As you can see, I've got the epoxy formed on the gear assembly there, and it cleared off the shaft, so we shouldn't have any problem with it sticking. And there is clearance in this bearing, so it's not like it's a really tight fit, so even if there was a little bit on here, it's not going to affect it at all. So I'm just going to let this thing set up, and we'll put it back together, and I'm pretty confident that that's probably all that's wrong with this machine. And then I can see what's on this tape here. Looks like he's got more cartoons on it. I looked at his other tape that he had, and that was in the other machine, in the Toshiba, because he had some classic tunes from, well, they all go back to, the probably 1950s, or whenever they made those, 50s and 60s, whenever they made them. Before everybody came so politically correct. And I tell you, looking back at some of the stuff, it's, well, I showed some of them to my son. I said, oh, take a look at these cartoons, and he was, let's just say, I wouldn't say offended, but he says, you can't show that now. I said, yeah, no kidding. Stuff that when I was a kid, we used to laugh about this stuff, right, and think nothing of it, and I don't think it harmed any of us. But with the sensitivity of some people these days, yeah, I can see why they would get offended by the hunter blowing the duck's head off. Like, you know which cartoon I'm talking about too. Yosemite Sam and Daffy Duck. Stuff that when I was a kid, when I was growing up, was on every Saturday morning, and we used to look forward to Saturday morning cartoons. And as I say, you couldn't get away with that today, but you can get away with the likes of South Park, which I think more people of my generation probably find that more offensive, but I'll leave it at that. Although some of it has been pretty funny. Or what was the other one? I never have watched it, but I've heard about it. What was it called? Family Guy. That's another one. Never watched it. But I think it's a hell of a lot more raunchy than anything from the 1960s was, but yet the cartoons from the 1960s are the ones that all got banned. Something about, even Walt Disney, something about a movie about Siamese cats and their eyes were just a little bit too slanted. Of course, I'm talking about that movie that is now banned, or if it hasn't, it's been re-edited to have scenes removed or altered. But this is the original unaltered Laserdisc. And I don't think it's ever been played. I don't think this movie has ever been out of the sleeve. I've never played it. It was given to me years ago with all of the other Disney. Every Disney movie that was released on Laserdisc, I have. My neighbor's son worked for Disney. He was an animator. And on not the early films, but on the later films, Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Cars, Buzz Lightyear, all those later movies that were done, like, 30 odd years ago, I guess, when they were doing computer animation. He was a casualty of the X-ray scandal from exposure, close range exposure to CRT monitors. He unfortunately lost his battle with many internal cancers, as according to his mother, who lives up the street, many people on his crew had some health issues that have been suspected of being caused by exposure to X-rays from CRT monitors. But she gave me his entire collection, including his Laserdisc player, which I've fixed it years ago and sold it. That was the Yamaha player. But anyway, I kept the movies, and I don't think this one. He may have played it once. I've never played it, but it doesn't have as much as a fingerprint on the disc. So I thought I'm gonna hang on to this because it's a collector's edition. Someday it might get played. To put the unit back together, I got to make sure that this gear is in place first, because otherwise, this one actually has a ridge on it that holds the other gear in place. So it's got to be in place like that as I put this one in and mesh it up like that so that it can turn it. I gotta pull this down a bit because I have to get this other gear in place. Okay, now I can push it in place, lock it in like that, and now this will turn. Does it stick a bit? Yeah, there's this one little spot there where it's a little bit stiff, but I think it'll be okay. I think it'll turn, no problem. Okay, time to put the loading mechanism back in place. It just drops in just like this. It only goes in one place. There's a hole in the bottom of the chassis that it fits into. So once I get it into place, it will mesh and turn the loading gear. As you can see, the loading gear is now turning. I'll get the two screws back in that hold it in place. And as I turn this, mechanism will complete its loading cycle. I want to get it threaded before I try to eject anything, just because I want to take the slack out of the tape so the tape doesn't get damaged. Okay, that's in place. Next, two screws in place. And then the belt, which is going to be reconnected. Belt goes on like that, and this little cap goes on to hold the belt from falling off. Remember that the solenoid plunger has to be on this side, so that when it pulls in, it can operate that mechanism. That is what controls whether this is threading or whether it's loading. It locks in place to load the tape cassette, and it locks the cassette loader so that it can operate the loading mechanism itself. So now I can plug this unit in and see if it works. That works. How about eject? Looks like it works to me. New Frontier, Donald Fagen. Is there music videos on here? Maybe there is. Let's load the tape. And eject. Yeah, it's a little sluggish, but you know, that's par for the course. This is a machine from, what, 1980? 85 maybe? I don't know. When was this one made? 85? I think this was 85. The 5200 was 83. 2700 was 84. This is likely 1985 because it would be the next year. But we can plug this into the TV and see what we get. Now, for you guys that are in love with 3D printers, and you know who you are, there's a reason that I don't try the 3D printed parts besides the cost factor. Because the guys that print the parts don't do it for nothing. And I don't have a printer. I'm never going to have a printer. I'm never going to have the CAD software. I'm never going to do it. It's not going to happen. I will retire before I resort to printing parts. I don't care how much people want to pay me. And there's a reason for that. When you install a 3D printed part that you have sold to somebody, you now own it forever. If that part breaks, they're going to want it done again for free. And the only experience I have with 3D printed parts goes back, I'm thinking probably 4 or 5 years now. A fellow sent me, it was a Samsung, it was a multi-system converter, I think it was an SV4000 that had a broken cam, and he had sent me 5 3D printed parts. Well, the first 3 I put on didn't even make it past testing before they broke. The 4th one went on, everything seemed to be okay, it worked. I loaded and unloaded the tape probably a dozen times, sent the machine back to him, got paid, sent the 5th part back because I didn't need it, and he contacted me within 3 weeks saying, yeah, it worked for a while and then it broke. And he was going to try, after looking at the video, he was going to try to, because now he knew how to change the part, he was going to change it himself and let me know whether he ever got, he made the part himself, right? And let me know whether he was able to ever get the thing working. Well, I never heard back from him as to whether he was able to get the 3D printed part that he made to work. But that was one instance. I had another instance where somebody sent me a 3D printed part and I put it on, and it seemed to work fine initially, but within a few months it wasn't working. The part broke. So I don't trust them for strength. They might be fine for some things, like making a phone case or a stand for something or a little clip to hold something in place, but for parts that have real torque on them, such as the loading gear like this, I don't think so. But when I've glued them together like this, they've always lasted. Rewind this tape and we'll see what's on it. Let's press play and see what we get.
Back with Ted Nugent.
Probably get hit with copyright by the Beatles for the extra there.
Nothing else tastes anything like them. Pure Cadbury's milk chocolate mix with shell, rich cream of vanilla, and the most delicious golden candy yolk any egg ever had.
They're in the stores now, but they won't be long. Just until Easter, then they'll be gone. Cadbury's Easter cream eggs.
You can get them wherever you buy candy bars, but just until Easter.
This is Toronto Television, City TV, Channel 79, Cable 7.
This dates this to before cellular telephones, because when the original first generation cellular telephones came out, they took away channels 70 through 83 for the cellular band. So this is prior to 1986. I would say this was recorded, well, this is early 80s, obviously. I don't know when it was recorded, but I guess if you recognize these music videos, this will kind of date it. And there's the Donald Fagen one that he's talking about. Okay, I can't play this, obviously. We'll just cut it off right about now. Listen to all that beautiful wow and flutter. Yeah, this was not recorded in hi-fi. This is mono. Okay, this one is working. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.